September 1st, 1939. Think about that date. It's one of those moments that just hangs in history, right? It's the day Germany invades Poland, and all the simmering tension of a really troubled decade finally just boils over into World War II. And on that exact day, a poet, sitting in a dive bar in New York City, was trying to make some sense of it all.
And that poet? None other than W.H. Auden. With just these few lines, he somehow managed to capture the feeling of an entire generation. You know, that sense of disillusionment, of uncertainty, and just plain fear. The hopes of the 1930s were toast, and what was left he called a low, dishonest decade. But Auden did way more than just capture the mood. He was basically diagnosing the sickness of the age. Okay, so let's dive into this. Because, you see, years before the war even started, Auden wrote this short, six-line poem called Epitaph on a Tyrant. And it is a chillingly precise breakdown of how authoritarianism works. It's kind of like he wrote the tyrant's playbook, and it feels just as relevant today as it did back then.
The poem kicks off with a word that sounds, pretty positive. Perfection. I mean, that sounds like a noble goal, something we should celebrate. But then, Auden immediately gives it a dark twist. And this is where Auden is just brilliant. Look at how he uses just three little words, of a kind, to completely flip the script. This isn't the perfection of an artist or a scientist. No, it's a twisted, specific kind of perfection. A perfection aimed against humanity. It's the perfection of a state that's been cleansed of anyone deemed undesirable. A vision that is, at its very core, a crime.
Okay, so how does this tyrant pull it off? What tools does he use to chase after this twisted perfection? Well, Auden calls it poetry, but he's not talking about sonnets and rhymes here. He means propaganda. The stories, the narratives, the version of history that the tyrant just invents to shape reality. And what's the number one feature of this poetry? It's easy. It's simple. And that right there, that's the core of the whole playbook. Tyranny just can't handle complexity. It can't survive nuance or shades of gray. It needs slogans. It's all about boiling the world down to us versus them, good versus evil. This kind of simple language is designed to bypass our critical thinking and speak directly to our most primitive, gut-level emotions. You see, the tyrant is a master at this. He's an expert at playing on our weaknesses. He gets our fears, our tribal instincts, our misplaced pride. He understands that people can get really emotional when it comes to big ideas like nation or religion, and he exploits those follies every chance he gets. And this next line, wow, it just perfectly captures that creepy atmosphere of fear and, well, bootlicking that surrounds the tyrant. Notice Auden says they burst with laughter, not burst into laughter. It's such a subtle but brilliant choice. It suggests the laughter isn't real, it isn't spontaneous. It's a performance, a forced public display of loyalty from these so-called respectable people. And then he drops the final line, and it is absolutely devastating. The tyrant's fake emotions, his crocodile tears, they have real, deadly consequences. While he's putting on this big show of compassion, innocent people are paying the highest price. It's this brutal gut punch of a contrast between his hollow feelings and a deadly reality. But here's the thing, a tyrant can't just rise up out of nowhere, right? He needs an audience, he needs an environment. And Auden understood that the public plays a huge part in this. So in his poem September 1, 1939, he turns that diagnostic eye of his away from the ruler and onto the ruled, onto the ordinary people who let tyranny take hold. So in that poem, he's looking around this New York bar, and he sees people just lost in their own little worlds. He describes each person as being locked in the cell of himself. What a powerful image. It's like your own personal freedom becomes a kind of prison. When everyone just retreats into their own private lives, worried about their own stuff, convinced they're free, it creates this dangerous vacuum in public life. And that's a vacuum authoritarianism is more than happy to fill. But you can't escape it. Reality always finds a way in. Auden writes that the odor of death offends the September night. It's this haunting reminder that no matter how much you try to shut the world out and stay in your cell, the stench of a global crisis, well, it gets everywhere. It's inescapable. So when you see all this happening, it naturally leads to a really tough question. It's one that haunted Auden his whole life when he really dug into in his elegy for the poet W.B. Yeats, which he also wrote in 1939. In a world that's on fire, with dictators marching and armies gathering, what's the point of art? Seriously, what's the point of poetry? I mean, really, let's be honest. In a time of crisis like that, can writing a poem actually do anything? Can it make anything happen when you're up against tanks and bombers? This was the challenge Auden was grappling with. Does art have any real power when it's faced with raw political force? And Auden's first answer is, well, it's pretty blunt, almost cynical. He just comes right out and says it. Poetry makes nothing happen. It doesn't stop an army. It doesn't get laws passed. On the surface, it seems totally powerless. But that's only the beginning of his argument. Let's see where he goes with this.
See, he argues that poetry's power isn't about direct action. It's something different, something deeper. First off, he says it survives. It outlasts the tyrants, the regimes, the wars, and it becomes a witness for future generations. Then, he says it becomes a way of happening, a mouth. It gives a voice to suffering, to truth, to experiences that might otherwise be completely silenced. And finally, in what he calls the desert of the heart, in those really dark times of grief and despair, it offers a healing fountain of understanding and comfort.
Okay, so let's bring this all together. What can we take from Auden's urgent message from way back in 1939? Why does his analysis of a low, dishonest decade still hit so hard today?
What Auden really gives us here is a kind of timeless toolkit, a guide for spotting the warning signs. He shows us how tyranny absolutely thrives on simple, easy slogans that are designed to bypass our brains. He warns us that when we all just retreat into the private cell of himself, we surrender the public square. And he reminds us that the truth is almost always messy and complicated, and that the real purpose of art isn't to be a political weapon, but to be a source of human resilience.
And all of this, really, it leaves us with one final and I think really urgent question for ourselves. As we try to navigate our own turbulent times, which, let's face it, often feel like another low, dishonest decade, we have to ask ourselves, whose poetry are we listening to? Are we tuning into the easy, simple slogans designed to get us angry and afraid? Or are we seeking out the more complex voices, the art, the ideas that challenge us, that preserve our humanity, and that might just offer that healing fountain when we need it most?